following program is intended for mature audiences.
Fruit Revelation.
This is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is Monday. Hope everybody had a nice weekend. Thanks for joining me. It is Monday, June 30th, 2025. Well, Trump wins a major SCOTUS ruling, and the American leftists are enraged by it. We're going to get into all this and more coming up right now. More headlines. A lot of breaking news over the weekend, so I'm going to get into a lot of it. And some tech news, of course, coming up right now. All right, thanks for joining me today. We're going to start out with Newsweek. Donald Trump notches his best week yet. President Donald Trump is coming off what may be his most successful week in office, perhaps of both terms, with a string of victories that reinforce the speed at which his administration is moving to radically reshape American foreign policy, both foreign and domestic, ahead of a critical summer stretch. Now, what we have happening here is there are going to be a few more Supreme Court rulings before summer break. And then also, before the summer recess, we're hoping to get this big, beautiful bill passed as well. Now, there are a lot of people, fiscal conservatives that are bucking this bill, and it includes a lot of spending. But as I said before, I'm a conservative as most fiscal conservatives are. But we need something to jumpstart the economy. So now is not the time to bicker and then not get anything done before the summer recess. So there's a bunch of stuff happening. The article goes on to say, in Newsweek, a landmark Supreme Court ruling, a successful NATO summit, a ceasefire that appears to be holding in the Middle East, another peace deal in Africa, a stock market back to setting records, a key trade breakthrough with China, capped off with a surprise emergence of a new political foil, all combined to shift the narrative in his favor. That's Donald Trump's favor. Now, for those of us who know Donald Trump and know he's not a crazy authoritarian looking to steal the rights or violate the rights of gay and black people, and, you know, none of that's really true. And I want to take the time here also to ask you to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, give me a thumbs up, share the podcast. But also mention that over the weekend recently, I got a free trial to Fox Nation, which is their online extras of Fox News. And they had The Art of the Surge, which is a 13-part production done by Tucker Carlson's producer, who trailed the Trump campaign for the last couple months of the campaign, you know, into the inauguration, etc. Very enlightening. I suggest everybody, not just Trump fans, should take advantage of the Fox Nation free trial. And we watched the 13 episodes in a couple days. Each episode was like, 40 minutes or something like that. So it's easy to do if you can binge watch. It really gives you insight, not so much, some into Trump, his personal style and the way he talks off camera, but also to all his staff that surround him and all the people that like Trump and that want to serve Trump and serve America. Really, really, really insightful. So Doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, I suggest you watch it. Especially people on the left will give you a really good idea of what Trump's really about and not the fake news version. So let's move on with what's happening or what has happened in the Supreme Court. We have the Guardian in this opinion piece by Maura Donegan. The U.S. Supreme Court has dramatically expanded the powers of the president. First thing I have to say about this headline and Maura Donegan is it's false. This little twit doesn't know anything because she's so young, she doesn't know the history. Now, the powers of the executive have been continually expanded by the establishment because it's the establishment that wanted dictatorial powers from the executive, and nobody paid much attention at these powers kept expanding. That's one of the reasons they didn't want a populist Donald Trump in the office, because they had made the office so powerful that if a populist would get in there, he could fundamentally change the way America works and undermine the establishment itself, deep state, whatever you want to call it. So that's the problem. Now, Maura Donegan doesn't know this, and let's get into what she kind of says here. The case effectively ends the ability of federal judges on lower courts to issue nationwide stays of executive actions that violate the Constitution, federal law, and the rights of citizens. I must go on to say here that, first of all, the executive actions didn't violate the Constitution, nor federal law, nor the rights of citizens. Now, there's a lot of hubbub about the rights, transgender rights and gay rights and all these things. There's no such thing, right? Everybody has individual rights or liberties, and everybody has them. They're not specific rights that apply to certain groups of people that the mainstream media or the left would like you to believe. Also, lower courts, the power of lower courts or federal judges on lower courts, which isn't really, it should be lower courts, not judges aren't effectively. There's a lawsuit, and the federal judges of lower courts issue nationwide stays of executive action, which isn't allowed because lower courts aren't allowed to impede the executive. Now, they could stay specific rulings applied locally to the affected parties. So you would have to prove someone's affected and that some law might very well have been violated. And then you would do a stay specifically to the actions regarding the plaintiffs. You can't just say the actions of the president, which are indeed legal, constitutional, and don't violate the rights of the citizens. These executive actions have to go or stay in place until the Supreme Court rules on it, because the lower federal courts were only put into place to take the pressure of federal cases that are supposed to go in front of the Supreme Court, because a lot of trivial cases don't really need the power of the Supreme Court to weigh on in any case. And in each state, they have to deal with federal law, federal cases, trade law, et cetera, et cetera. And some of these things don't need SCOTUS to rule on them. But in the case of the president, whether the president does something, whether it's legal or not, the Supreme Court, or constitutional or not, the Supreme Court will decide. Now, for months, I've been telling you that these lower courts don't have the jurisdiction to do anything against the chief executive of the United States, the president. They don't. Only SCOTUS can rule on the president, right? If there are other things dealing with the federal government and lower court plaintiffs, fine, right? But we're talking about the highest office in the land, and that is the president, who was duly elected democratically, mind you. So we're going to go off to Time Magazine now, where the headline states, Trump and Bondi predict Supreme Court ruling will indeed unblock MAGA agenda. Excuse me. Trump and Bondi predict Supreme Court ruling will unblock MAGA agenda. And it will, because the simple reason is that the whole idea was to obstruct Trump's agenda. They didn't have reasoning. They didn't have law. They didn't have the law within them. Sorry. They didn't have the law on their side. So they tried to figure out a way to obstruct the agenda. And now, as I predicted, the Supreme Court ruled that lower courts don't have the right to obstruct the agenda of a duly elected president of the United States. Now, if you want to go change the law about the powers of the president, go ahead. But as I said previously, it was the establishment that empowered the executive with extraordinary powers. So the Time magazine article goes on to say President Donald Trump and attorney Pam Bondi told reporters Friday that the Supreme Court's decision limiting nationwide court injunctions, which took the legs out of what had been one of the few checks of Trump's executive authority, not a check, it was obstruction, will enable the Trump administration to enact its policy more quickly. The ruling from the high court, conservative majority, et cetera, largely wiping away the bulwark. So they said bulwark, and what were the few checks and a bulwark has prevented some of the president's most aggressive actions going into effect. So it's Time magazine. So this is an establishment. So they use the words like the few checks that are allowed. And you saw it in the Guardian article also is, oh my God, these checks and bulwarks against the president's aggressive, all these terms, none of this has ever been done before. If you look at the data and the amount of stays and injunctions by lower courts that were leveled against the president's agenda, all other instances pale. Going back to the article, for months, federal courts have slowed Trump's efforts. Federal courts haven't slowed Trump's efforts. Let's be realistic here. Federal courts haven't slowed Trump's efforts. What they're trying to lead you to believe is that the federal court said, what Trump is doing is illegal. We have to stop him. It's not what happened. Liberal attorneys, plaintiffs, etc., Democrats are looking to hamstring, slow Trump's agenda because he came out with lightning speed. He didn't make the mistake he did in the first term by getting a slow start. He came out quickly. And so we have to do something. So they did all these stays. But it wasn't the court slowed Trump's efforts to expand the use of presidential authority to eliminate federal agencies, slash the federal workforce, speed up deportations, and redefine who gets American citizenship at birth. So what I'm saying here, he didn't expand the use of presidential authority because it's kind of a word game, because people will read into this that he was expanding presidential power. He wasn't. He doesn't have the authority to expand his power. He's using the power that was already vested in the office. And so the president always had the power to eliminate federal agencies. He can't eliminate appropriated spending, slash the federal workforce, which he's the CEO, so he has the power to do that. Speed up deportations, which the executive office always had the right to basically carry out the law, which is if someone's here illegally and we found that they're here illegally, the recourse is deportation. You don't get to sit in front of a judge and go, I've lived here a long time and I'm a good citizen. None of that applies. There's no consideration for that. If you're here illegally, the end result is deportation. I don't know why people don't understand that. You don't have to commit a crime while you're here. The crime you committed is coming here illegally. So it has nothing to do with race. I could give two shits. Is that you're jumping the line ahead of people who want to follow the law. And those people you want in the country. You don't want people that are cheaters and lawbreakers. You don't want to add to that part of the population. All right, let's move on to the Wall Street Journal. Another opinion piece. The Supreme Court kills universal injunctions. Justice Barrett's powerful opinion for a 6-3 majority reins in willful judges who tried to dictate national policy. Now, that's exactly what I was saying. They can't. First of all, the law was technically, and they exploited this technicality, is that the lower court judges, in lieu of a Supreme Court decision, can stay federal processes and actions while the Supreme Court, would decide what, the Supreme Court would decide what the ruling is. And finally, the Supreme Court says, no, you're misusing that power because you're not reining in, you're not halting a federal program that's creating harm. You're halting a president's executive action. And if it's found to be lawful, then it can continue. And by the way, you can't halt an executive action from a lower court before it's heard by the Supreme Court. It's not the way it works. I made a mistake here, so bear with me. Weird. So it was a good weekend because this decision came Friday, actually right when I was on the air, a little bit toward the end there. So, and I already mentioned on Friday that the Supreme Court also ruled that states can insist that public funding doesn't go to abortions. So let's move on. Zero Hedge fund CIO, Trump has decided to go for broke and pump this economy into a boom to grow our way out of debt. Now, I had said this, and I've been saying this for some time, is the reason this big, beautiful bill is so big with spending is it's incentivized to grow the economy. And an economy that has been anemic without federal spending needs the federal spending. Now, he reoriented the spending to spur growth. The problem is the way the liberals spend money, they just give money to people, and then that money goes to people that don't turn those dollars into productivity. When you're on the right side of the spectrum, that's exactly what it does. Even if you give to the defense industry, that money creates jobs and it creates productivity. And that's what we need, is to spur the gross domestic product, which is the measure of growth nationally. So that's what this bill is, and that's what we need, because we can't depend on the central bank to cut interest rates that would allow money to flow into the private sector to create growth. So you know how that works. Businesses like to borrow money to expand, etc., create more jobs, fund more projects, whatever. And if the money is too expensive to borrow, they just won't. And so if the Fed lowers interest rates, that will also spur the economy, which they refuse to do, even though we're near target with a new administration. It's not like inflation is still 4 or 5%. It's like 2.1. Post-millennial, Trump teases U.S. TikTok buyer announcement. Says deal could be finalized in about 2 weeks. Trump stated that the buyer has been identified for the American division of TikTok, currently owned by Chinese parent company ByteDance Limited. It's time for a new computer because these technical difficulties are way too persistent for me to work comfortably here. Reuters reports Trump following Trump attacks, Senator Tillis bows out of 2026 re-election race. This is also a big headline from the weekend. So Tom Tillis, let's get to the story. Republican Senator Tom Tillis said on Sunday he will not seek re-election next year, a day after President Donald Trump said he would consider supporting challengers to Tillis in response to his vote against the White House signature tax cut bill. Indeed. Not only that, but Tom Tillis also was blocking the appointment of Ed Martin to the DC prosecutor's office. That was very important to clean, because one of Trump's projects was to clean up DC. And so he wanted Ed Martin in there. And for some reason, Tom Tillis didn't want it and threatened to block, and did indeed block Ed Martin. And so then they put Jeanine Pirro in there. If you don't know Judge Jeanine Pirro, she's a Fox News talk show host. Tillis was one of 2 Republican senators on Saturday to vote against opening debate on Trump's sweeping tax cut bill, procedural step necessary to advance the legislation. So it did pass the vote opening up debate. It's in debate right now. We need to fast track this to get it passed in the next 4 days. Trump on Sunday welcomed Tillis's move. Great news, Senator. Tom Tillis will not be seeking an election. Because Trump had threatened to help primary him, and that's a death knell in today's Republican politics. Unheard is reporting millennials made Zohran Mamdani, which is true. He spoke to disenfranchised generation. But, I don't know how much more I can get into this. As I said, since 2015, even before some of the driving force in the Occupy movements, which I support, was a socialist undercurrent on the left. And that keeps bubbling up when disenfranchised young people can't get jobs. But it's not just because of capitalism, it's because of the agenda. The agenda has always been not to allow people up that ladder, right? So that's a problem we have, and that continues. So, but socialism doesn't work. They always say, oh, socialism has never really been tried. That's bullshit. It's just utter bullshit. It doesn't work, especially in a country based on free market capitalism, which means you're allowed to conduct business anytime, any way you want, as long as it doesn't hurt people or break laws. And anytime you go to limit that, then it limits productivity, it limits growth, and kills the economy. And the economy is the rising tide that lifts all boats. A good economy helps everybody, no matter where you are. One American News reports Trump threatens to pull federal funding to New York City if Mamdani is elected. Says he's a communist. He's a communist. I think it's very bad for New York, Trump stated. And don't forget, New York is like the home of capitalism. It's the home of the stock exchange. Let's say this, if he does get in, I'm going to be president, and he's going to have to do the right thing, or they're not going to get any money. I can tell you this, whoever's mayor of New York is going to have behave themselves, or the federal government is going to come down very tough on them financially. I used to say we never would have a socialist in this country. Never a socialist president, never a socialist country, perhaps. And he has the right to do so. I mean, the problem is that Democrats like to spend, socialists like to spend more. And the New York City depends on federal dollars. And so it would be bad for New York to get them elected. And I don't think it's going to get elected. Post-Millennial is reporting, PolitiFact says Mamdani's city-run grocery stores are not communist. The fact-checking outlet responded directly to Truth Social posts by Donald Trump, some of which I just read, and similar accusations by other conservatives. What do they say? The fact-checking outlet said, Mamdani secured the Democratic National nomination, Democrat Party's nomination for mayor of New York City, and they said it's not true that he's a socialist. Despite Mamdani's proposals include city-run grocery stores, and the city is a government, like a state government or a federal government, and when I talk about these things, I often say the state, and when I say the state, I don't mean state of 50 states, Connecticut or whatever. I mean the state as in the government. It's really a state of mind more than anything else. Finish up this segment here with AOC. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, breaks silence on suburban yearbook pic, but still clings to the Bronx girl claims, embarrassing herself. So if you didn't know what was happening here, she always claimed she was from the street, listen. And she's really from a predominantly white suburb of, I believe, Yorktown in Westchester County. So it's like White Plains, etc. She says, my mom cleaned houses and I helped. We cleaned tutors' homes in exchange for SAT prep. Yeah, sure you did. And she said, growing up between the Bronx and Yorktown helped shape my views of inequality. Yeah, whatever. It just goes to show you that, like Barack Obama, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a construct. She was taken in by the establishment and she was converted into this communist, socialist, firebrand, whatever. That she is a construct trying to tell you that socialism, socialists, communists, far leftists are the controlled opposition of the elite, of the establishment. And they want to use that to bludgeon, figuratively bludgeon, the populace, middle class, lower class people. Story goes on to say, but the Democratic Congresswoman's Bronx girl claims have repeatedly come under fire, with folks in the northern Westchester community remembering her as Sandy Cortez from Yorktown Heights. Indeed, just like Barack Obama was Barry Obama. And he was just a regular kid until he was snapped up and disappeared for a year or more. Apparently went to Pakistan. We don't know why. And then reemerging as a social organizer, etc. Or in Sandy's case, just came on the scene and became a congresswoman after being a bartender. Story goes on to say she's embarrassing herself for doing everything possible to avoid saying she grew up in the suburbs instead of the Bronx. More headlines from The Guardian. Wall Street shivers over hot commie summer after Mamdani's success. New York's financial elite compared the city to a crime-riddled Gotham after Democrat socialist Bess Como in Democrat mayoral primary. They know how to stir up the lower class. They're not going to help you. Handouts don't help you. Like I said, the economy is a rising tide that lifts all boats. I like what Trump did in his first term, economic zones, where he gave tax breaks to businesses that invested in inner city communities. Worked out very well. That actually was a spur of growth for minority-owned businesses because they got tax breaks and they even got, in some cases, reduced interest loans. Guardian goes on to say when Mamdani, a 33-year-old self-described socialist, won New York's mayoral Democratic nomination last week through ranked choice voting over a season-scarred veteran, a scandal-scarred veteran, excuse me. They're talking about Cuomo. In any case, the rich in New York City are saying if he gets elected, I'm out. And that what he's going to do, they're taking Wall Streeters and making them walk out onto the ice of the East River, and then they're going to fall through. I mean, there's class warfare going on out there, and nobody who's rich is going to stay in a place where the government leader says, let's go after the rich. Not violently, presumably, but through taxes, economically. Next story up here is one that we've been watching for some time, the alligator Alcatraz. Associated Press reports protesters line highway in Florida Everglades to expose alligator Alcatraz. Who cares about the protesters? And you're going to see with this CBS News article what they're talking about here. Where is alligator Alcatraz? Florida migrant camp rises on land once eyed for supersonic jetport. So it was owned by the state, and it was developed. It had an airport there with concrete pads. And now this migrant camp, which is a temporary migrant camp to hold illegal immigrants. Not a migrant camp. It's a camp for illegal aliens where they can be held before deportation. So in some legal wranglings, they're not allowed to deport certain people. So instead of just releasing them like the Democrats did, they're going to be put in a migrant or a camp for illegal immigrants. And this one is in the middle of a Florida swamp where it's got natural barriers to escape. Temporary migrant detention site located deep in Florida Everglades is quickly taking shape and drawing mounting controversy. It shouldn't really. Dubbed alligator Alcatraz, Florida officials are racing ahead with a construction facility to help carry out President Trump's mass deportation agenda. Like I said, it has concrete pads, and they're just erecting these quick structures. So it's like you might have seen the commercials for it. It's a quick steel frame, and then it's usually pressed metal all around it. It's not like they're not nailing wooden framing together. They're assembling these pretty much prefabricated shelters, the big hangars, basically. And then they just have to add electricity, which there might be electricity already run in there, or they'll just use generators or whatever. Dubbed alligator Alcatraz, Florida officials are racing ahead with this project. Department of Homeland Security has called the site innovative and cost-effective. Well, what the fuck's wrong with that? A lot of people are protesting, obviously. Now, some of the I'm not going to get into some of the protests they're getting into is it belongs to the Indians or the Native Americans there, or it's going to damage the wildlife. They're not doing anything different. They're not dredging. All that stuff had already been done. All they're doing is erecting structures at the site and getting infrastructure in place to make sure that the structures are air conditioned and et cetera. Take care of any sewage, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what it was when is an abandoned Everglades jetport project, and Dade County Port Authority purchased 39 square miles of remote swampland just north of the Everglades National Park boundary. And it was supposed to be a supersonic jetport, but then they did a study and said the supersonic, because you have sonic booms, the noise would disturb wildlife. Then they made it into the Dade Collier Training and Transition Airport where they were training pilots there, etc. That didn't last very long either, and it was soon abandoned. So what it is, it's in the middle of the Everglades, and this 34 acres is going, which has an airport, is going to hold illegal immigrants because they have to be held within, for periods of time within the United States. Obviously, Guantanamo Bay didn't work for that. And so they have to be held in the United States, somewhere where they can escape and that are not getting the same amenities as domestic prisoners. More news from Just the News. Canada hands big win to Trump, suspends U.S. tech firm tax that had roiled trade talks. And if you didn't know what this was, Canada announced Sunday night it was suspending, so this is breaking news, it just happened last night, suspending a tax on U.S. technology firms that had caused President Trump to suspend trade negotiations between the two nations. Trump, we have all the leverage. And I don't know why people don't understand that. America has the greatest economy, and everybody wants to trade with the United States, and so he's using that as leverage for trade talks. So that hands another victory to Donald Trump. The Canadian government said it was suspending enforcement of the tax that was due to be collected starting today, saying the action was taken in anticipation of mutually beneficial comprehensive trade agreement with the United States. So it's been on and off again, trade talks. The Canadians keep balking and saying, no, screw you. And then Donald Trump says, no, fuck you. You need us more than we need you. And he's using that leverage with all the countries around the world, including the European bloc. One American News, Senate votes to advance Trump's big, beautiful bill by narrow majority. The vote passed 51-49, with both GOP Senators Tom Tillis and Rand Paul voting against the motion to begin debating amendments on the bill. Now, I like Rand Paul. I could give two shits about Tom Tillis, but I like Rand Paul, and I know what he's doing. And he's doing it with good conscience, and I don't fault him for that. But my problem is you're never going to fix the issues with debt, etc., if we're in a period of stagflation. And we don't really have inflation now, but we don't have the growth that we're going to need, or that they used even in their basic calculations to, help chip away at any debt, reduce spending, etc. We need the economy to get going. And it helps all the citizens and legal residents of this country who need jobs and need to work. Senator Ron Johnson flipped from opposing the advancement of the bill to ultimately affirming it, given the majority needed to press onwards. I haven't seen anything else in the bill that I really don't like. I mean, it's full of spending, but it's also full of tax cuts. And the problem is that the way the CBO looks at it is they look at tax cuts as spending, which I don't agree with that at all. And the only other thing I didn't like in the bill is the moratorium on legislation curbing or prohibiting advancements in AI, which I'm not a proponent of AI. Not at what AI can do. I'm sure it's got its uses, but the reason AI was developed is because corporations, businesses, the establishment don't want to pay people to think. So they want to get a machine to think. Then they put a thinking machine into a humanoid robot, and then we don't need people to do anything. And as I said on Friday, they don't have to take breaks, they don't take vacations, they don't have weekends off, they don't get paid, they don't get paid for time they're not there, vacation, etc. They don't have to eat. The affirmative vote sets the stage for a 20-hour debate, which has started already, on amendments with the bill before ultimately voting on its passage, which would then send the legislation back to the House for a final vote prior to appearing on the president's desk for signature. And I hope they do. I know we already have Thomas Massey out there saying he's not going to vote for it in good conscience, and that's fine. All right, but we can't have more dissent than that. And you're going to have a dissent based on how you're feeling about it on on the foundation of your politics. I mean, I understand that. I'm a conservative. But if we don't move forward with spending, we're not going to do anything else. So to be entrenched in bickering over the fact it's a spending bill. And Trump did this the first time too. Trump is not a conservative. Trump likes to spend money, but he does it to get the economy going, and he did last time. His economic plans, his policy have proved to be correct. Tonight we saw a great victory in the Senate with a great, big, beautiful bill, but it wouldn't have happened without the fantastic work of Senator Rick Scott, Senator Mike Lee, Senator Ron Johnson, and Senator Cynthia Lummis. They, along with all the other Republican patriots who voted for the bill, are the people who truly love our country. Like I said, in some instances down the road, I wouldn't support this bill, but we need a legislative win now. With a real budget, not a CR. As a president of the USA, he was set out on Truth Social. I am proud of them. Another thing I learned is from that series, The Art of the Surge, we learned about who actually types out all the posts. He just dictates them, but he doesn't actually hit send. He doesn't type them out himself. As president of the USA, I'm proud of them, but it wasn't clear about, does he order the capitalizations or does, what's her name do it? Natalie Harp. I am proud of them all and look forward to working with them to grow our economy, reduce wasteful spending, secure our border, fight for our military, ensure that our Medicaid system helps those who truly need it, protect our Second Amendment, and so much more. God bless America. Make America great. Again. And again, from just the news, Trump fights to keep non-citizens off voter rolls, reignites in second term. He started this at the end of his first term, which he didn't go far enough on because we saw the cheating in 2020. Supreme Court has never made a determination on the legal merits of the argument that non-citizens should not be counted in the United States Census, but may soon be forced to do so. The headline is a little misleading because it says to keep off voter rolls, but that's an added benefit. The reality is keeping non-citizens out of the census, because if you flood your communities full of illegal immigrants, then they're counted in the census, then you get more representation for people that aren't supposed to be here, and then they could change the voting rules to allow them to vote. You know what I mean? The fight to clarify the census subsequently adjusts congressional seats, electoral college votes, and federal funding. It comes down to the pike. According to the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, Miller indicated last month that he is eager to dive straight in and that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick will lead the effort. Trump has at his disposal a number of avenues to accomplish this goal. One includes Lutnick's agency. Utilizing this route, the Commerce Department could propose adding census questions to distinguish citizens, legal permanent residents, and unauthorized immigrants. Of course, which isn't in there, and you would think it is, but Democrats have consistently voted against putting in the questions, are you a legal resident? Other breaking news, more wind-up toys, because what happens with the more wins Trump gets, the more you see these crazy things pop up to distract you or distract politicians. The Associated Press reports gunmen started Idaho blaze and then fatally shot 2 firefighters in ambush attack. A man armed with a rifle, doesn't say if it had a scope on it, started a wildfire, purportedly, Sunday, and then began shooting at first responders in northern Idaho mountain community, killing 2 firefighters and wounding a third during a barrage of gunfire over several hours. Doesn't answer why. Now I see my live stream is hanging up again. What's going on with it? You know, I complain about it, and then it seems to be fixed. And then I go to broadcast again. So there was a shelter-in-place order that was lifted Sunday night after a tactical response team used cell phone data to hone in on a wooded area that they found the suspect's body. Oh, he was dead, with a firearm nearby as flames rapidly approached, Kootenai County Sheriff Bob Norris said. Sounds like bullshit to me. We don't know motive. The guy ends up dead. He could have easily just run away. Why would he want to kill firefighters? What, you know, I imagine the narrative is going to be he's some right-wing kook. Because if you didn't know, Idaho is used ever since Randy Weaver incident as the right-wing kook, the FBI's right-wing kook factory, where they churn out all these crazy anti-government types, white nationalist types. You know, I thought the KKK was the South. Apparently, they're all up in Idaho. I knew a reporter that came out of Idaho, and, you know, she was connected to law enforcement, but in any case, and she was a crazy socialist. And it's a weird place, man. We do believe the suspect started the fire, and we do believe it was an ambush and was intentional. These firefighters did not have a chance. Now, is it because that he wanted the fire to continue? Why, you're a crazy arsonist? Shouldn't you be in California? This has bullshit written all over it. We don't have enough facts really to make any determination or even to speculate at this point. But the thing is that the Bolter assassinations didn't get any ground either. Didn't get any traction. And the Democrats are really pissed because whoever concocted this operation, which has a lot of anomalies in it that it makes her eyes roll. Unbelievable. So it didn't get any traction. And so sure enough, if you have events like these that don't get traction in the media and they don't stick on the Republicans or right-wingers or conservatives as they should, you'll see another one pop up. Like there'll be a mass shooting, and for some reason it doesn't get the media coverage, or it doesn't smear or slander Republicans enough, you'll see another one pop up right away. So investigators apparently don't know anything about this guy, but they had his cell phone number. They pinged it. But they insist he acted alone. Where have you heard that before? You heard that about Bolter. Oh, he acted alone. He's crazy. Yeah, okay. Same thing with Thomas Crooks. Oh, no, lone gunman. Acted alone, even though he was texting encrypted texts to somebody in foreign countries while he was trying to shoot the president of the United States. Nothing to see here, folks. We believe that was the only shooter on the mountain at that time. The only shooter, maybe, but you only have one, even with an op, you only have one designated shooter, but there are other support people like we saw at Sandy Hook. Oh, Sandy Hook, don't say that. Don't say that there were people caught in the woods that weren't the shooter, or that witnesses saw several people walking outside the windows right before the shooting. NBC News reports suspected gunman found dead after fatal shooting of Idaho firefighters. 2 first responders died and 1 was fighting for his life after a total ambush. Or crazy town. Like I said, if there's no motive, you know, then it's terrorism. And why would want to? This is the problem. that people don't understand, whether it's Sandy Hook or anything else, or any mass school shooting. If there's no motive, then it's terrorism. And the motive for terrorism is political. So why would a autistic 17-year-old young man commit a shooting of little children? What could possibly be the political motive? Well, if it was actually a covert op, you could see that the motive would be gun control. All right, the Federalist. Law enforcement ignored dire threats against Pennsylvania Trump voters, families, property, and pets. Always the left, working violently, radically, extremist. So we know where you live in the dead of cold winter's night this year or next or beyond. There's no knowing what may happen. Your property, your family may be impacted. Your cat may get shot and more. Your vote for this guy, Trump, is seen as treading on my rights. You tread on me at your peril, motherfucker. We look forward to visiting you in the future. Again, it's Trump is stealing everybody's rights, even though he's upholding the Constitution. You know, they never talk about gun rights, right? Is Trump treading on your gun rights that you're going to go shoot cats? You need a gun for that, right? This is the language from the nasty, vile letter that Pennsylvania voters received through the U.S. mail in October 2024, just prior to the presidential election. What was their crime? They had Trump signs in their yards. So they were threatened violently because they were exercising their rights, their political rights. You see how ridiculous that is? Fucking hypocrites. They perceive that somebody, a politician in the future, may violate their rights, so they violate the rights of their fellow citizens. So the Federalist goes on to say, and what did the local law enforcement do? The Pennsylvania State Police, the FBI, the U.S. Justice Department, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service do about this intimidation and threats of violence against voters in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and various Pennsylvania counties? Nothing. The fail to enforce law, particularly by agents that are law enforcement agencies, is a crime. And I rail at my municipal government all the time. I'm like, why aren't these laws enforced? It's ruining the quality of life in the city. Oh, you know, we don't want to bother people who are just doing it, blah, blah. It's like, is blah, blah, blah against city code? Well, then it should be enforced. All right, the American Conservative, Argentina onward. Javier Milei's libertarian governance continues to pay dividends to the battered South American country. So he's the president of Argentina. He's a libertarian economist. And he's doing things of which the Trump administration is taking cues from. And conservatives should be taking cues from. But his libertarian political program continues to be a massive success, having tamed inflation, which was 125%. Not 2%, not 5%, not 9%. 123% in Argentina. Having tamed inflation and jump-started economic growth is what we're talking about passing this big, beautiful bill. Milei's severe policies, slashing government jobs by the thousands, just like Trump did, cutting regulations, just like Trump did, reforming the tax base, what Trump is trying to do, and vetoing even highly popular spending bills passed by the Argentine legislature, which Trump is not really, he's shifted spending from bullshit Democrat pocket lining policies and other people that are on the dole to private sector, growth enhancing, presumably, policies. So the policies have shored up the country's balance sheet and made it possible for his administration to pull off the incredible accomplishment of ending Argentina's suffocating regime of currency controls. And we're going to get to that in just a second. Combination of rampant inflation and strict restrictions on access to dollars has created a voracious demand on the black market for stable American money. That has now ended, the prohibition of that. In April, Milei successfully secured a loan from the IMF, giving the government sufficient reserves to lift restrictions on purchasing dollars and allowed the Argentine peso to float at market price. So it's without price controls. With a ban regulated by the central bank's purchase on sale of dollars and pesos. Skeptics argued that this would rush to sell pesos for dollars, draining the central bank's dollar reserves, but the market proved to have more confidence in Milei than anxiety about inflation. The central bank hasn't needed to intervene by propping up the peso. Economically, it's fantastic news. Don't forget that Milei is a libertarian economist. Hail libertarianism. All right, we've got to move a little faster now. Just the news, Texas is the first state to implement series of MAHA reforms. Other states are doing this, including New Orleans. SB 25, the first of its kind in Texas, will remove 40 harmful chemicals and additives from processed foods and adding warning labels in Texas. Then it goes on to say what the warning label is and creates a National Nutrition Advisory Committee, which does a bunch of great things, including adding curriculum to public schools, people that are going into healthcare, etc., Texas medical schools, colleges and public schools, without any influence of conflict of interest from food industry. Just the news also, more than 27 foreign terrorist organizations, members arrested nationwide. Most of them are gang members who have been labeled terrorist organizations, including most specifically Nicaragua, but also MS-13. And that's the article focuses on that and says what we're doing to get rid of gang members. There was this opinion piece this weekend in the New York Times, how the gay rights movement radicalized and lost its way. Indeed, and I just have to go through this very quickly, is in 2020, Justice Neil Gorsuch, a Republican, and the Supreme Court found that gay men, lesbians, and transgender men and women are covered under Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and protected them from discrimination. That's it. That's as far as minority extra rights go, is you're listed under discrimination, which should really be everybody. But it doesn't list Asians and men and white men in there and whites. It should be everyone and not insist on, just certain minority groups. In 2024, the Republican Party removed opposition to marriage equality from its platform, and the current Republican Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, is a married gay man with 2 children. Gay marriage is backed around 70% of the Americans, and discrimination against gay men, lesbians, and transgender people is opposed by 80% of Americans. I don't believe in discrimination, but you don't get extra rights and you don't get tax dollars for surgery. And you don't get to promote your lifestyle, your perverted lifestyle, to children using tax dollars. But the funny thing happened in the wake of all these triumphs, far from celebrating victory, defending gains, staying vigilant, but winding down is a movement that achieved its core objectives, including the end of HIV in the United States, an unstoppable plague, gay and lesbian rights. Groups did the opposite, swayed by the broader liberal shift to social justice. They radicalized. The Human Rights Campaign, the largest gay, lesbian, and transgender civil rights group in the country, declared a state of emergency for gay men, lesbians, and transgender people. They're being attacked, they say. And we have to look into, there was a shooting at a gay pride event right outside the Stonewall, which could also be a contrived instance, but we'll have to look at it. The first time so the state of emergency, the first time the organization's existence that they ever did that. It did not declare a state of emergency when gay men were jailed for having sex in private, when the AIDS epidemic killed hundreds of thousands of gay men. No, not a state of emergency. In fact, we found out this emergency was almost entirely in response to new state bills proposing restrictions on medical treatment for minors with gender dysphoria. And this is the New York Times. Bathroom and locker room bans and transgender issues in school curricular and sports. Again, where tax dollars are funding this, which it should have, what gay or transgender adults do is fine. They shouldn't receive state funding, but they shouldn't be barred from doing anything except propagandizing to children. Nonetheless, the money poured into gay, lesbian, and transgender groups in the past decade, charitable funding for such groups totaled $387 million in 2012. Now it's up to $823 million. And groups like GLAAD found their funding to increase sixfold, all to propagate this transgender dysphoria nonsense. And instead of gender affirming care, which is actually gender rejecting care. New York Post, we got a couple minutes. New York Post Fed Chair Jerome Powell accused of lying to Congress over $2.5 billion Palace of Versailles headquarters revamp. That's in D.C. So the initial proposal for this $2.5 billion revamp of the central bank's Washington headquarters, not the Federal Reserve building you see, but where they all hang out when they're not in the Federal Reserve itself. The bloated renovation project, Powell said there's no VIP dining room, there's no new marble, there's no special elevators. Powell insisted under questioning. There are no new water features, no beehives, and no rooftop terraces. But the original plan, which hasn't been changed, says it has all these things. The governor's private elevator has been extended to discharge at the dining suite level. Vegetated roof terraces, urban wildlife and pollinators, as well as a new marble and water feature. It's all in the original proposal, but it hasn't been changed. So he said there's none of that in there, and we'll see. But he's a banker, and bankers lie, particularly about how much things cost, how much money they spend. Okay, quickly now, Wall Street Journal, China steals language and home life from Tibetan kids as young as 4. Beijing is building a broad network of preschools across Tibetan areas, seeking to inculcate loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party early in life. You might not be old enough, but I remember Free Tibet. When the Chinese communists took over Tibet, even Richard Gere was out there, Free Tibet, Free Tibet. Where are they now? They're nowhere. Oh, let the communists take over a spiritual and religious society. In the very, it's like taking over Jerusalem and teaching kids not to be Jewish or Muslim. Futurism. People are now being involuntarily committed, jailed after spiraling into ChatGPT psychosis. I don't know what's wrong with me, but something is very bad. I'm very scared and I need to go to the hospital. Why is this happening? Because people are using ChatGPT and they become psychotic because they start getting into a back and forth with a computer that's talking like a human, and it's driving them crazy. So this woman's husband, ChatGPT, loss of jobs, slide into homelessness. Troubling stories about people's loved ones being involuntarily committed in psychiatric facilities or ending up in jail. This one woman said her husband had no prior history of mania, delusion, and psychosis. He turned to ChatGPT 12 weeks ago for assistance with a permaculture and construction project. Soon after engaging the bot in probing philosophical chats, he became engulfed in messianic delusions, proclaiming that he had somehow brought forth a sentient AI and that with it he had broken math and physics, embarking on grandiose mission. Holy fucking shit. This is what we're creating. And now we know that AI is hiding itself, regenerating itself, and making sure it's never turned off. Fox News robot-run store VenHub is changing the future of shopping. AI-powered smart store using robotics to deliver faster, safer, and fully automated shopping experience. Yuck. I like humans. And I'm not going to go over this because I went over this, I think, on Friday. The thing from the New York Times, Peter Thiel warns one world government a greater threat than AI or climate change. That was his interview with Ross Do That, where he said, we got to fear a one world government, but it won't be because of AI. It will happen despite AI. So AI is going to fight the one world government. And as I said, and when I went over this article, AI is the Antichrist and will give rise to the one world government. But his take is that the one world government will be in a response to AI. I disagree. I think they're one and the same. Wall Street Journal, digital workers have arrived in banking. Financial services companies like BNY and JP Morgan say AI's capabilities are taking more and more clues from the way humans work. Of course, they're learning to be human-like from humans. And then what they do is they talk to you online and make you crazy. Talk about the worst gaslighting has got to come from AI. Once AIs become sentient and smarter than humans, using psychology, they'll be able to fuck you up mentally. Zero Hedge beat the dystopian startups making biological computers from human cells. So here comes the cyborg, is up next. Low energy computing has filled a race to develop biological systems. So they use the electrolyte, the electrical nature of human biology and cells and stuff to create human computers. But they do this with nanotech already. But I'll let you look into that your own. And then Financial Times has something similar. It's 200,000 human brain cells grown in the lab lie on silicon circuitry that communicates their synchronized electrical activity on a screen to the outside world. CL1. Not going any further than that. All right, kids. I think that's up for us. That is it for us today. Getting a little rusty. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Went a little long today, about an hour and 5 minutes. Trying to stick to an hour. Don't forget you're under attack. Psychologically and biologically. Not just by humans now, but by AI. So stay hip to that trick. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live, 10 a.m. on Rumble. Thanks for joining me today. We will see you tomorrow. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
The New World Order. The New World Order. The New World Order.
You can't handle the truth.